As of the end of 2024, I've ridden 159 roller coasters in 51 parks across 13 countries. Yesterday, we began the top 100 by counting down positions 100 to 51. Today, we're counting down the second half. These are my top 50 roller coasters that I've ridden as of the end of 2024. Number 50 is Giant Splash at Lotte World Adventure Busan. I first rode Giant Splash on my trip to South Korea in January 2023. This is a Mark Power Splash and it was my first of the model. The fact that it was winter definitely made the experience a little rough, but I was immediately impressed by the ride's theming. As for the ride itself, the launches actually provide a little more punch than Mark rides usually does, the spikes offered good floater, and the splashdown was absolutely huge. I'd love to re-ride one of these on a warm day so that I can really appreciate that splashdown. This is a solid ride and a decent number 2 for the opening of this brand new park. Number 49 is Big Dipper at Luna Park Sydney. I first rode Big Dipper as a Luna Park employee on New Year's Eve 2021, just before we opened for the New Year's party event. What struck me immediately about this intimate hot racer was that there was already a rattle, even though the ride had only been open for 5 days. Let's be real, the hot racer prototype had plenty of flaws, but it still makes my top 50 for that punchy layout that offers some good inversions and even a very respectable airtime moment in such a narrow footprint and short track length. Intamin really took on the challenge that Luna Park presented them with this plot of land and made the absolute most of it. Big Dipper is a solid little coaster. Number 48 is French Revolution at Lotte World. I first rode French Revolution on that 2023 South Korea trip, and it's a Vekoma Mark 1200, so I rode it first, almost expecting to be getting it out of the way, so to speak. I gained so much respect for this ride, it's not funny. I expected it to be a bit rough, pretty unpleasant, not much to it, but it really wasn't rough at all. And the force over that drop into the vertical loop was absolutely tremendous. In the end, I couldn't really fault it. Sure, it's not the perfect coaster, but I thought it was perfectly comfortable and had a lot more force than your average looper would, plus with all that great theming surrounding it. I think Lotte World hit this one out of the park. Number 47 is Gold Coaster at Dreamworld. I have a few friends who will remember a time when I hated this ride. I first rode this arrow looping coaster back when it was the Cyclone and it was not pleasant. But Dreamworld have made a really good move adding the new Vekoma trains with vest restraints, and since then I've grown a real appreciation for this ride. Aside from one clunky transition, I don't think this ride really suffers from the same problems that most arrows do, and it has a unique layout that maintains its speed and delivers a lot of force through its 2 inversions. I think a lot of the bad reputation this ride gets is just left over from the Cyclone days, and I'd highly recommend trying it again if you haven't since then. The new trains make a world of difference. Number 46 is Green Lantern Coaster at Warner Bros. Movie World. This is one of my more unpopular Gold Coast opinions, I'm sure, but I think Green Lantern deserves a lot more respect than it gets. This SNS El Loco is clearly number 3 at Movie World, and sure, the lack of theming is an absolute offense to the very existence of the park, but as far as the coaster lineup itself goes, I really have a lot of respect for this ride. We boast one of the steepest drops in the world and certainly the best of the El Loco model, thanks to those comfortable lap bars on the 4 across cars. The hang time on this coaster's inversions is second to none, and really, while it's a fairly bland car park coaster at a park that should not be building car park coasters, I think it deserves more love. Number 45 is Mandrill Mayhem at Chessington World of Adventures. This was my 100th credit when I visited Chessington in July this year. This launched B&M wing coaster actually came as a bit of a surprise to me. On the outside, it looks like the layout is a bit too slow and simple, but really the ride has some nice punchy launches and great hang time through the inversion. As far as family thrill coasters go, I think B&M did an excellent job here. And that's not to mention the theming, which looks absolutely excellent. It's very encouraging to see Chessington putting this kind of effort into their themed lands, and I have high expectations for the things that are rumoured to be on the horizon for them. Mandrill Mayhem was not the 100th that I had planned, but I'm satisfied with it. It was a decent enough coaster. Number 44 is Abyss at Adventure World. I'm already prepared for the comments on the next 2 entries. I hated on the Smiler for being too rough and headbanging too much, but the Gerstlauer Eurofighters are not all about the lateral inversions like the Smiler is. Abyss also offers incredible ejector airtime over the first drop and airtime hill, and a layout that puts distance between its inversions. I actually really enjoy the Eurofighters, and I'll stand by that. Abyss in particular has good ambience, although I do wish they committed more to the theming, which is what keeps it in the lower position of the 2. But at the end of the day, Abyss is only ahead of the Smiler by 12 positions, so you guys can keep your snarky comments to yourselves. I loved Abyss, and I thought it was one of Australia's most intense coasters. Number 43 is Soar the Ride at Thorpe Park. Soar is very close in terms of its layout to Abyss with very minor variations, and actually, I think Soar is marginally rougher, but what separates them is the theming. My greatest disappointment with Abyss is that the theming and backstory are so interesting, yet the park didn't really commit to doing anything beyond some sculptures and some mood lighting. Soar is a much more complete package. I wouldn't recommend riding either of these rides with large earrings on. As I said, they are admittedly rough rides, but I really appreciate the power they offer, particularly in the airtime department. I think ultimately the answer is that I find the Smiler to be too much, while Abyss and Soar are equally uncomfortable, but in just enough of a dose that I'm still able to enjoy it somewhat. Number 42 is Silver Star at Europa Park. How on earth does a coaster of this scale end up so low on my rankings? This was my first B&M hypercoaster and I was so excited. I've heard so much about how the B&M Hypers are a more mild but fluid experience than other hypers, full of repeated sustained flow to airtime, but Silver Star was just so hit and miss. For every airtime hill that made me smile, there was one that left me bitterly disappointed. I didn't really think the ride was shaky, as some people have said, but I was just really disappointed with the airtime that it managed to offer for a ride of that size. I think the hills might be too shallow, and that ends up with it just wasting all that speed on essentially zero force at times. I could see the potential, but Silver Star just didn't deliver. Number 41 is Wood Express at Park St. Paul. This ride absolutely fascinated me. It's a Gravity Group family wooden coaster, and its compact layout is kind of a perfect design if I'm honest. The Gravity Group clearly saw that they had a small footprint to work with, and they crammed in a double out and back layout that is so full of flow to airtime that it really came as a surprise. From start to finish, the ride continues to deliver over and over. This coaster is the definition of the phrase, good things come in small packages. You could maybe describe it as repetitive, but who can complain when it's repeated, solid flow to airtime like this? What a ride, and it's a real step in the right direction in terms of quality for Park St. Paul. I hope they can build upon the area around this coaster with more quality attractions. Number 40 is Wild Train at Fantasiana. Speaking of good things coming in small packages, Wild Train might be an even more perfect example. This PAX product is going to be sorely missed by the roller coaster world. It may only have stood 18 meters tall and had 300 meters of track, but it had among the most powerful airtime I've ever experienced. This ride was definitely not for everybody. It was pretty janky and painful, but to me that was the charm. Getting absolutely launched out of your seat like the ride was trying to send you to Mars? I am going to miss this ride, and even when I revisit to take a ride on their new world-class Mark Striker coaster, there will be a little part of me mourning the loss of this incredibly unique attraction. For once, PAX got something right. Number 39 is Jet Rescue at SeaWorld. I had some disappointing rides on this Intamin family launch coaster back in January, but not enough to completely affect my opinion that this is one of Australia's most underrated roller coasters. Jet Rescue may be short, but it offers a really fast-paced ride experience with an extraordinarily whippy second half that lives up to many of the best coasters in the country. When you consider that this was only the second family launch coaster by Intamin, and that the first was the monstrosity up the road, you really have to take your hat off to them. Jet Rescue is an excellent product. Whipping around those turns so close to the ground really makes for a heart-pounding ride, and I just wish it was ever so slightly longer. Number 38 is Dragon's Fury at Chessington World of Adventures. This is another coaster that really blew my expectations out of the water. This Maurer spinner has a particularly bizarre layout, but it makes it work in an incredible way. On my first ride, I was alone in my car, and I remember the sheer intensity that Dragon's Fury offered. Aggressive spinning, crazy elements, and even a little bit of airtime. It's such a shame that I had to be evacuated on that lap because riding with other riders was a notable downgrade. That being said, it was still probably the best spinning coaster I've ever been on. It's amazing to think that Maurer built this at the same time as they built Spinball Whizzer. They got so much more creative with Chessington's installation, and it really paid off for them. Number 37 is Diving Machine G5 at Janferson Fancy World. This is Oblivion's often forgotten younger sister in Taiwan, the second B&M dive coaster ever built. What makes Diving Machine a different experience to Oblivion is that the ride sits on the side of a very steep hill, with the drop sitting much higher off the ground and the bank turn sitting probably 45 meters off the ground. For that reason, I found the drop much more intimidating on Diving Machine. But on the other hand, the ride is far less themed, and I felt the original was the better experience overall. That being said, Diving Machine will always be my first dive coaster, and I think it offered some great airtime over the drop, a smooth ride experience, and some powerful positive G-force through the valley. Number 36 is Oblivion at Alton Towers. As I already mentioned, Oblivion just edges out its younger sister due to the improved theming and presentation, which makes it a more complete ride experience. One thing that I do love about the older B&Ms is the over-the-shoulder restraints. There's something about those older B&M over-the-shoulder restraints that provides you with so much room to experience airtime, and that works excellently for the drops on these older dive coasters. It's the rare exception to the rule that I prefer anything over an over-the-shoulder restraint. I actually think B&M made a mistake switching to the vest restraints, which are much more restrictive across the chest. Oblivion is a great ride. Obviously the layout is very short, but that airtime is not to be sneezed at. Number 35 is Tower of Terror 2 at Dreamworld. I am extremely nostalgic for this ride. Once the world's tallest and fastest roller coaster, this Intamin reverse freefall coaster has now been gone for 5 years, and oh how I miss it. In reality, the ride experience was nothing too special, but it was the intensity that made it special for me. The roar of the train, the launch that seemingly built speed for an eternity, and the lighting effects in that dark tunnel. The sustained flow to airtime on the tower was also excellent. Maybe I overrate it, but I think any Dreamworld fan would agree that Tower of Terror was an icon of the park. Even though the theming was a little bizarre, it was still there, and the added airtime means it definitely deserves to be above the Oblivion clones. What a ride. Number 34 is Scooby-Doo Spooky Coaster at Warner Brothers Movie World. I think everyone in Australia is counting down the days until this coaster reopens from this refurbishment. This Mark Wild Mouse Cross Dark ride was absolutely one of the best family rides in the country when it first opened. The perfect blend between an immersive and incredibly intricate dark ride and a fun little family thrill coaster that provided just enough for the entire family. The elevator lift and backwards drop were an incredible touch, and the original animatronics were top class. Unfortunately, the next generation reimagining did ruin the charm somewhat, but I'm hopeful that Movie World have recognized the flaws and that we'll see a much improved version of the ride reopening in 2025. Number 33 is TNT at Goombaya World. I constantly wonder if I'm overrating TNT because it seems so bizarre to say that Australia's best family coaster is at Goombaya World. But in reality, this Vekoma SFC really ticks all the boxes, and the Melbourne Park did a fantastic job with it. This clone layout really has some nice forces, particularly in the first drop and the overbank, and the theming is executed really well for the budget the park was working with. They really paid a lot of attention to detail, and it shows. It's one of the smoothest coasters I've ever ridden, and it's endlessly re-rideable. Yes, it's a little short, but that's the only criticism I can really level at it. As far as family coasters go, the Vekoma SFC 453 meter layout is pretty much pure perfection, and I have to take my hats off to Goombaya World for the execution of this ride. Number 32 is Eagle Warrior at VinWonders Phu Quoc. This is my other Vekoma SFC credit, and it takes the cake for very obvious reasons. Something that I didn't expect from VinWonders was Disney-level immersiveness and theming, but oh my god, this park is something else, and Eagle Warrior was the best of the bunch when it comes to ride presentation. The queue is so expansive and well themed, and that already brilliant Vekoma layout is accompanied by lighting effects that really add to the ride's frenetic pacing, smoothness, and forces. It feels like a dream, like you're flying through some sort of magical world. This ride was the one that truly sold me on VinWonders. It was already a beautiful park with an incredible aquarium and one of my favorite ever coasters, but to have such a brilliantly themed number 2 was mind-blowing. Number 31 is Big Thunder Mountain at Tokyo Disneyland. No one does theming quite like Disney, and Tokyo Disneyland's Big Thunder Mountain was just executed so well. It's a lengthy ride, family friendly but still full of lateral force and a lot of variety. It runs perfectly smooth, the operations are literal perfection, and of course, the theming is incredible. It's hard not to actually believe that you've been swept away into the Wild West. There's just such attention to detail, and the ride's layout is so expansive and beautifully constructed. I'll always have a soft spot for my first Disney coasters. Number 30 is Space Mountain at Tokyo Disneyland. But the slightly better of the Disney coasters was Space Mountain. While it was certainly rougher than Big Thunder, Space Mountain just had a lot more to offer in the coaster department itself, with a layout that felt much faster paced, with more rapid transitions and moments of sudden force. Plus, riding in the dark always really adds something to the ride. It lived up to expectations in terms of the theming, and was an incredibly fun and thrilling coaster to boot. I'm excited to see what Intamin are cooking up for the new version at Tokyo Disney, but part of me will always miss the Aerodynamics original. Number 29 is Rita at Alton Towers. I really can't understand where all the hatred comes from for this Intamin accelerator. Yes, it's the weakest of the model that I've ridden, but not by that much. I think there's a natural aversion to it because it's different, but that's what I liked about Rita. Sure, it's short, but most accelerators are. Rita offered a punchy launch, a snappy first transition, and then raw speed with flow to airtime, followed by one nice ejector moment towards the end of the ride. Ultimately, I agree that I prefer the accelerators that are focused on airtime moments, but I still thought Rita was a good ride. Anything with an Intamin hydraulic launch is automatically off to an excellent start in my books. So Digital Dan can come at me. Rita's in my top 30. Number 28 is Gravity Max at Li Pao Discovery World. This is another ride that on the surface is far too short, but what it does offer is world class. The prototype Vekoma Tilt Coaster is an excellent proof of concept, and I'm shocked it's taken this long for another park to want to build one. The tilt track is such an excellent element, really building the anticipation, offering such a huge amount of sustained hang time, followed by excellent floater once the train drops. Gravity Max also has grey out positives through the tunnel and a very powerful vertical loop, although the helix at the end is just filler. If it weren't for the terrible operations, Gravity Max would be endlessly re-rideable, and it's the reason I'm so excited for rides like Siren's Curse and Circuit Breaker. We're in for an absolute treat with those. Number 27 is Insane Speed at Janferson Fancy World. Here I go again, disagreeing with creators that are much bigger than me. Janferson Fancy World's B&M Flawless Coaster is the best coaster in Taiwan, and it's not as rough as Coaster Studios made it out to be. There, I said it. While there is one violent pothole just after the second corkscrew, the rest of the ride was only as bad as any of the other older B&Ms I've ridden so far, and it had a great layout with some good forces. The sustained flow to airtime off the straight first drop was really good. The first two inversions are very powerful, and the interlocking corkscrews are incredibly whippy. I'd definitely like to see it get some better maintenance to improve those few rough moments, but actually, the ride as a whole was nowhere near as bad as some are saying. I liked it. Number 26 is Revenge of the Mummy at Universal Studios Singapore. Theming can make an average ride a great ride, and no ride makes that more true than Revenge of the Mummy. The coaster itself is a Premier Rides product with an okay layout, lots of direction and speed changes, show scenes, and a decent enough launch. But it's the way this ride tells its story with incredible effects, animatronics, audio, and projections. We should expect this from Universal at this stage, but Revenge of the Mummy is just such a neat and impressive package. It's the kind of ride I wish we would get at our Australian parks, with less focus on the ride model itself and more on the craftsmanship and the storytelling. Number 25 is Battlestar Galactica Cylon at Universal Studios Singapore. Contrary to some opinions though, I think Cylon just edged Revenge of the Mummy out as my favourite coaster at Universal Singapore. I was not too impressed after my first ride, but once the ride warmed up in the afternoon, I loved it. Especially in the positives department, it really delivers. The dive into the trench before the vertical loop is absolutely face-peeling, and I love the uniqueness of some of the inversions. It rides a lot more like a B&M invert than a Vekoma one, and it's a really interesting ride compared to Vekoma's other works in the inverted genre. Some of the transitions are a little shuffly and clunky, which I put down to it being a prototype and having to negotiate the dueling elements, but overall, I was blown away by it. You know what else I'm blown away by? The support of these channel members who make all of this content possible. If you'd like to join the membership crew, click the join button down below. It's cheap, there's great perks, and you really do help the channel out. Number 24 is Stealth at Thorpe Park. Is it now the fastest accelerating coaster in the world? I don't know, that debate is getting too complicated for me, but the launch certainly tries to peel your face off, so that's good enough for me. The ejector airtime over the top hat and into the final brakes was absolutely excellent as well. The ride vibrates a little bit, and I certainly can't rank a coaster this short too highly, but Stealth is a powerful machine. There really isn't anything quite like the Intamin hydraulic launches, and I hope that a decent number of them stick around a little while longer, even though we're starting to see them disappear. The initial kick that they provide is something that LSM launches just can't match. It feels like you leave your soul behind you. Number 23 is Wicker Man at Alton Towers. This is another coaster that's truly made by the presentation. The pre-show is utterly breathtaking, certainly the best I've seen on any coaster in the world so far. And I'm a huge fan of the entire area around this ride, including, of course, that amazing sculpture in the middle of the layout. As for this GCI Woody itself, I thought it was very respectable, with good laterals in particular and a nice long layout. It is ultimately more of a family thrill coaster, but I still do think it could use some more airtime. But all in all, it was definitely my favorite coaster at Alton Towers. It's a step above the rest in terms of theming, and it's a fun, fast-paced, and lengthy ride with good variety. But seriously, that pre-show, oh my god, that's incredible. Number 22 is Cuchulainn at Emerald Park. I've grown a bit of a love-hate relationship with this coaster the more I've ridden it. Emerald Park's Gravity Group Woody has a tremendous first half. The first drop is utterly incredible, there's brilliant flow to airtime, the double down is a crazy moment, and the overbank is breathtaking. In my experience though, I find the ride loses its pace pretty badly in the second half, and a lot of the airtime moments can really miss the mark from there on. It also has a tendency to run quite rough, and I'd like to see it get some track work in the coming seasons. But as I've said before, I love the Gravity Group's airtime focused layouts, and Cuchulainn is one of the biggest and most intimidating of them. Smooth it up a little bit and get that second half running just a tiny bit faster, and it'll be much better. Number 21 is Tonnerre de Zeus at Parc Astérix. This ride is insane. Built by CCI and refurbished by the Gravity Group, it has the Timberliner trains and all the airtime you'd expect of a Gravity Group coaster, with the slight amount of jank and less perfect design of a classic CCI. If you're a fan of a fast, aggressive wooden coaster that shows absolutely no mercy and will leave your jaw on the floor, look no further. I was blown away by how fast and forceful Tonnerre de Zeus was. That being said, it is a little rough, and there are a couple of moments of very awkward and downright painful transitions. For me, that's forgiven for being so forceful and downright fun. The tunnels with the lightning effect are a brilliant touch, and it's a great number 3 for the park. Parc Astérix might have one of my favorite lineups anywhere in the world. Number 20 is Sick at Flamingo Land. It's amazing what a different restraint will do to improve a ride. Flamingo Land's Intamin 10 inversion coaster walks all over Colossus, and I really think the only difference is the lap bars and maybe also the cable lift. Sick was still not perfectly smooth, the theming was of similar quality, and I'm still not a fan of some aspects of the layout like the quadruple barrel roll. But the more comfortable and freeing restraints added together with that little bit of extra initial speed thanks to the cable lift made this coaster run so much better than Colossus. It's fast and forceful with incredible inversions that you're actually able to appreciate thanks to the lack of headbanging. Those corkscrews were so whippy, and I was shocked by the positives going into the loop. This is a great coaster, far better than anything else at the park. Number 19 is Atlantis Adventure at Lotte World. Here we have another brilliantly themed coaster, although I do question whether the show scene in the middle was necessary since it didn't seem to do very much. That being said, the world's only Intamin Aqua Tracks more than makes up for it with a great first launch and ejector airtime that feels almost like it was unintentional. You are thrown out of your seat over that indoor top hat, and the airtime is also brilliant off the drop in the second half. The rest of the layout is fast with rapid transitions, and it runs reasonably smoothly. Unfortunately, I experienced it in winter without the water effects, so I'm expecting that I might love it even more when I revisit in summer and get to experience the ride as it was truly intended. Number 18 is Steel Taipan at Dreamworld. Out of the 3 Blue Fire clones I've now ridden, Steel Taipan does still remain the weakest, although I have a lot of love for it. In my opinion, while the Twisted Spike is one of the highlights of the ride, the swing launch sacrifices a lot of pace through the layout and the punchiness of the launch, which already wasn't spectacular considering that it's a Mark product. That being said, the ride is very smooth, the tail whip seats are a fantastic addition, and it's a good, lengthy coaster with a few great inversions, especially that barrel roll, which is taken at such breakneck speed. If Dreamworld gets a signature coaster, this will be the perfect number 2. Number 17 is Giant Digger at Lotte World Adventure Busan. Giant Digger runs very similarly to Steel Taipan, but with the single initial launch that has a lot more punch to it, and just a slightly better pace through the layout as a whole. The theming in the station is also significantly better, and the park has opted for the better Mark lap bars without the seatbelts and with the more lightweight design. It's obviously the same ride, just mirrored and with minor differences that make it a slight improvement. Again, I think this park needs something better as a signature coaster if it's ever going to be worth revisiting, but this would be a perfect number 2 thrill coaster. Number 16 is BlueSky Mega Coaster at Europa Park. I've now ridden the original, and there's no question that it's the best of the bunch. As well as having that punchier launch and additional pace compared to Steel Taipan, BlueSky also has an excellently themed little pre-show section and tremendous near-miss elements with the rock work around the layout, which adds a whole lot to the experience. I expected this coaster might rattle a little considering it's far older than the 2 clones I've ridden, but actually, it's still running quite smooth and offers a very satisfying and comfortable ride. Plus, with Europa Park having bigger and better coasters to offer, I think BlueSky is able to play a more effective role in the lineup as a brilliant supporting act, rather than a headliner that doesn't quite deliver. Number 15 is Icon at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Considering that one of my major criticisms of the BlueSky layout is that it tends to just glide through the motions and lacks pace, you would probably have expected that I would rank Icon below them. But I really thought this custom Mark launch coaster delivered a whole lot more than I expected. The airtime over the first hill, the hang time through the inversion and the Junior Immelman, the laterals and the lengthy varied layout, it's a far more complete ride and it has much more interesting forces. I didn't leave myself enough time to try out the Enzo seats, but I can almost guarantee that they will only improve my opinion of this coaster. I really do think it's an excellent and very unique ride. Number 14 is Swarm at Thorpe Park. Thorpe Park has 2 B&Ms that are almost perfect, they just need to be a little bit longer. That length issue is most obvious on their wing coaster. This ride has 4 incredible inversions and runs so smoothly with a great mix of force and hang time and of course, brilliant near-miss elements. The theming is also probably some of the best in the park. Realistically, it just needs another few elements as the ride comes to an end far too soon, especially on my visit when the ride was running 1 train with a 2-hour queue. It loses some marks on the bang for your buck department, but what it does have to offer is some of my favorite elements from B&M so far. That rollover down drop is one of my favorite moments ever. Number 13 is Nemesis Inferno at Thorpe Park. Thorpe Park's B&M invert just takes the cake over Swarm for me for a few reasons. Firstly, it's a far more aggressive ride, which I do prefer. The corkscrews and 0G rolls are so whippy, and the ride just feels a lot more fast-paced and energetic than Swarm. The first drop into the loop offers respectable positives, and of course you have those over-the-shoulder restraints that always surprise me with how much room they offer you. For its age, Nemesis Inferno is running incredibly smoothly. The theming is not as strong as Swarm's, but I still do like the volcano concept, and the lighting inside the station is effective. This is a good ride. Number 12 is Monster at Whirligate Grand Est. Whirligate doesn't deserve Monster. It hurts me to think that this huge B&M invert is being overlooked by plenty of enthusiasts simply because it's in a rundown little regional park in a part of France that has not much else to offer. It also enrages me that they're keeping it not just unthemed, but without so much as a station building. The ride is presented terribly. But I'm very glad I decided to go because wow, this coaster is aggressive. For my American viewers, imagine Raptor at Cedar Point, but if the mid-course brakes didn't exist. The corkscrews in the second half could only be described as violent in the best way possible. It's a breathtaking coaster, and fortunately it still runs okay in terms of smoothness, so I'd recommend a visit if you get the chance. Number 11 is Fina Force at Emerald Park. My son, my child, my precious baby that I will cherish for the rest of my life. I worked on the operating team on this coaster on its opening day, and for that reason, I'll always have a special bond with Fina Force. But it is by no means in 11th position because of nepotism. Vekoma's second STC has a truly perfected layout with a first half that piles on the positives and a second half that feels like the inverted version of Jet Rescue combined with some brilliant airtime. Those whippy transitions so close to the ground are a masterstroke from Vekoma. This ride is so smooth, so powerful, so incredibly designed, and I could rant for days about how much I love it. Please, theme parks, take note and buy more STCs. They are a brilliant product. Number 10 is Osiris at Parc Asterix. In terms of presentation, I think this might be the most impressive coaster I've ridden so far. Just looking at this B&M invert from the plaza outside is a marvel. The facade is incredible, the fountains complement it so well, and the theming is superb. It rides very differently to the other B&M inverts I've been on, but that was a fact that grew on me after a couple of rides. It's much less about the whippy inversions and more about long, flowing elements and near misses with the theming and landscaping below. The dive beneath the fountains is one of my favorite moments ever on a coaster, and experiencing it in the front row is a must-do. Once again, Park Asterix really has a perfect 1-2-3 combo with its biggest coasters. Number 9 is Roaring Timbers at Sunworld Hon Nature Park. It still blows my mind that I have this credit. On a trip to Vietnam with my partner, which happened to overlap with my birthday, I decided that I wanted to find some credits to get as a birthday celebration. We ended up traveling to Phu Quoc for 2 parks in one day, Vin Wonders, and this mysterious little park off the coast of the island that had just built a brand new GCI apparently. And what a ride it was! Such a great layout that uses the terrain perfectly to its advantage, offering great airtime and laterals, and such a fast-paced experience remaining so close to the ground. Plus, the station and plaza are presented so beautifully. I had no idea that Sunworld would be more than just the quick credit side quest on my visit to Vin Wonders. It really is worth a visit in its own right. Number 8 is Wodan Timber Coaster at Europa Park. Wodan comes very close to being my favorite wooden coaster of all time. While I also love Roaring Timbers and Wicker Man, this was a GCI on a new scale compared to the others that I've ridden, so I was curious how it would ride. The answer? Incredibly smoothly, with a rapid and powerful layout that mixes in fun lateral elements with the airtime. GCIs seem to get far more creative than the Gravity Group sometimes, and Wodan is the perfect example. The area around the ride looks spectacular and the ride is a masterpiece. Plus, the operations were absolutely astounding. They were rolling trains like it was nothing. Number 7 is Superman Escape at Warner Bros. Movie World. Still the best accelerator I've been on? Absolutely yes. As I mentioned before, intimate accelerators always tend to be short, but Superman Escape is the one that I've ridden so far that actually does something to solve that problem. An excellent pre-show section and really high quality theming that does just enough to make the ride feel like a complete experience. As for the coaster itself, combine that always incredible punchy hydraulic launch with that awesome top hat, followed by 2 amazing ejector airtime moments, near misses, and low to the ground turns. Superman still holds up. I hope they keep the hydraulic launch around for as long as possible because this ride is incredible. Number 6 is Leviathan at SeaWorld. Levy is still clinging on for dear life to its status as my favorite wooden coaster. I criticized it last summer for getting rapidly rougher, but ultimately it's still better than Cuchulainn or Tonnerre de Zeus, and it has a far wilder layout that packs in so much to a compact footprint. You never seem to know what's coming next on Leviathan, and you rarely have time to prepare yourself. It just hurtles from one element to the next. It's certainly the best paced ride I've ever been on, and the backward seats, as always, are an excellent finishing touch. Plus, the station just looks spectacular. It's a very complete package, especially by Australia's standards. Number 5 is Wrath of Zeus at Vin Wonders Phu Quoc. The cherry on top of my breathtaking visit to Vin Wonders was their signature coaster. I was excited to ride this Vekoma Firestorm, don't get me wrong, but I don't think I anticipated how close it would come to being my new number 1. This ride has G-force out the wazoo. The LSM launch is so powerful, and it's a grey out machine at the bottom of that top hat. The 3 inversions are absolutely mighty, and then the second half of the ride focuses on off-axis airtime and a similar rapid, close-to-the-ground layout as the second half of Fina Force. I'm excited to see more modern Vekoma launch coasters coming. It needed to happen because Vietnam got their hands on a world-class coaster while nobody was looking, and the world needs to take note. Number 4 is Hyperia at Thorpe Park. Ah, Hyperia. How close to perfect this Mark Hyper is. What I love about this layout is that it seemingly throws the rulebook out the window. 180-degree twisting vertical first drop, towering inversions, and that clinically insane outer bank element. Mark Rides really just said, how can we make this ride as insane as possible? And it delivers with sustained ejector and some outright crazy moments. But there are just a couple of fundamental flaws that hold it back from my top 3. The length being one, and that splashdown being another. I understand that there were scrapped plans to include a plaza within the footprint of the ride or whatever, but guys, this splashdown is pointless. No one can see it from off-ride, so it's basically just an unnecessarily aggressive trim break. This is the biggest buzzkill on any coaster, if you ask me. Number 3 is DC Rivals Hypercoaster at Warner Brothers Movie World. I know you were all looking forward to the day that it would finally be toppled off the number 1 spot on my rankings, and while that did finally happen, DC Rivals does still hold up for me. It's the superior Mark Hyper in my books, with a much lengthier and more complete layout, punchier airtime moments, a first drop that's almost as good as Hyperia's, and that non-inverting loop. Plus, there's the backwards seats to boot. I really wish that both of the Mark Hypers had done more with their theming, but looking purely at the coasters themselves, they're both world class, and DC Rivals just edges the battle to take the bottom spot on my podium as of the end of 2024. Number 2 is Tutatis at Park Asterix. The coaster that finally dethroned DC Rivals on my rankings was Tutatis. This Intamin LSM launch coaster really has it all. Great theming, a smooth ride experience, comfortable restraints, crazy airtime, great inversions, a fast-paced and powerful layout, and that swing launch. Oh my god, that launch is insane. Mark rides need to take note on how to do a swing launch because Tutatis is wild. The addition of the speed hill in the middle of the launch is the perfect touch. It's such a crazy pop of airtime. Tutatis is ultimately just bananas. It's almost a perfect ride. Front or back, it rides superbly. I can't fault it. Number 1 is Voltron at Europa Park. But Mark Rides really came back at Intamin and said, whatever you could do, I can do better. Voltron is Mark's magnum opus. Just from a technical and design standpoint, it's one of the most incredible rides ever created. From the theming to the operations to the multi-dimensional aspects to the beyond vertical launch, the recovery swing launch block, the turntable, everything is so incredible. It's a marvel to watch in motion. But it also rides incredibly well. Some of the most powerful airtime I've experienced, incredible inversions, and one of the fastest and most aggressive layouts anywhere in the world, stretching over such a lengthy ride time. Voltron, like Tutatis, is almost perfect. It was love at first ride for me on this coaster, and if it isn't the best coaster in the world currently, I look forward to finding the one that is. That wraps up my top 100 countdown for 2024. Thank you all so much for your support over the course of this year. It means the world to me. I look forward to bringing you more exciting content in 2025, and stay tuned because Coaster Odyssey Season 2 is well into the planning stages. Stay tuned, click the like and subscribe buttons, and I will see you all in the next video.